the use of the prominence of the term techmeria indicates not so much actual empiricism as the need for a rhetoric of proof in an epidectic culture in which the doctors as well as Herodotus was simply influenced by the medieval medical writers of their times. It was more appropriate to view him as part of a larger intellectual movement, and this movement was about now the historians are of the opinion that these terms were practiced in sciences, especially medical sciences. They wanted proof of the efficacy of the medicine or the treatment. So the term proof, techmeria, comes from there, and it has been applied to history writing. So this his use of techmeria, for example, is both similar. I mean Herodotus, both similar to or distinct from the contemporary scientists with the meaning they try to give. While many of the techmeria in medieval writings serve arguments about the present, Herodotus makes a difference. He frequently uses them for reconstruction of the past. For instance, one of the characteristics that prompts Herodotus to assume that Colchians have descended from Egyptians, I am giving you an example, is their use of circumcision, which other than these two people, only the Ethiopians have practiced, right from Egypt in the following. The Phoenicians seem to have learned circumcision from the Egyptians. Since those Phoenicians, who no longer mingled with Egyptians, ceased to circumcise their boys, therefore Herodotus concludes he is taking all the stories of this, and then he concludes on the basis of this that the Colchians must have taken over the practice from Egypt too. It is obvious that their argument combines debatable observations with even more questionable logical deductions. At the same time, it is worth noting that techmeria, as well as the argument proved by them with the help of the proofs, are not general ethnographic reflections but serious historical reconstructions. Herodotus, our major information about this great historian comes from his own writings. He was born in around 484 BC minus plus 15 years and died in 425 BC minus plus 15 years. Because there is a debate, so I have put it in these brackets. There is a broader time frame. He was born in Asia Minor. He is considered a Greek historian, so somebody might ask why you have included him in Greek history. So I will give the justification. Where at that time, Greek language was spoken. That was the language was practiced and was considered by the Greeks as part of Greece. These two are the arguments. Later, he migrated to Athens and ultimately to Italy. He was a great itinerant, having visited Iran, Spain, Palestine, Syria, Egypt, etc., because he is writing about these places, these countries, and it is a great testimony to his observations that when he describes something in the first person, he will say, I saw this. So he has in most cases been found correct. Subsequently, when they were corroborated by other contemporary evidence, he has been found to be absolutely correct when he is saying in the first person. Chiefly on the basis of his own observations, he so sat down to write what he described as the history of Persian wars with Greece. His major objective, as per his claim, was to describe these wars, but in fact, while he set out to do so, he was deceiving his readers. Deceiving means he is not deceiving as such by he is taking a series of digressions when he will be leave aside the main story and go into the violence of other subsidiary stories. So that's what I am saying, that to a modern writer or to a modern reader, it would appear as if he is deceiving us, but he is not. He is not losing track of the main story, but digressions are there, which will not be, we will not find in Thucydides. So, by providing detailed information about not just Iran, but also Palestine, Iraq, Egypt, and even India, which supposedly he had never visited, but for India he gives some information which are really, very surprising, that how could he be so true. His account can more appropriately be considered as the first effort towards writing a universal history. He is dealing with so many countries. His account of the Persian Wars with Greece covers the period from 500 BC to 449 BC. It is the first surviving prose work on Greece of this length. All previous works about Greece are either in poetry or in very short works of prose. The second major contribution of his work lies in the fact that in writing history, he makes full use of geography. And his geographical accounts are not simple descriptions of the physical characteristics or topography of a particular region or particular regions, but betray an appreciative understanding of the interaction of geography on history and society. So, he is the first who is dealing with the relationship between geography and history, on which I had already given you a talk. This is nowhere more explicit than in his description of wars, wherein he, in assessing the factors of strength or weaknesses or vulnerabilities of the parties involved, he takes care to give due importance to the geographical factor behind success or failure of any event. So, besides, while assessing the nature of particular societies or behavior of particular peoples, I would underline this because he is looking into the psychological thing of. Yesterday we had spoken about, in my last lecture, I had spoken about a relationship between history and psychology. He is preceding everyone. It is only we attribute it to the post-Durkheim phase of writing history. But here you see, this gentleman is touching this point as early as 5th century BC. He takes care not to lose sight of the geographical specificities in shaping them. For example, while seeking an answer to the question why Scythians are nomads, Scythians, they had come to India also, so why they are nomads, he suggests that their nomadism might have something to do with, the country they lived in. They lived in the steppes, S-T-E-P-P-E-S, steppes. So they were shepherds, they were hunter-gatherers kind of things, so they were migrant, itinerant population. What is perhaps even more surprising than his interest in geography is the near accuracy, and that is the hallmark of Herodotus, with which he describes the topography and other physical characteristics of regions as far off as India of western part, Egypt, etc. Herodotus knew no other language except Greek, and dependent obviously to a larger extent on what people told him to write of histories of such areas as Iraq, Egypt and India, yet he has been found to be fairly reliable. I will give you examples also. What he says about Persian history from Darius onwards has been corroborated by inscriptions. If you corroborate his information with his contemporary inscriptions, you will find his narrative is borne out by the contemporary inscriptions. His list of major occurrences in Darius's reign has again been verified by inscriptions. He also mentions some Indian provinces like Gandhara, for instance, the existence of which are now well known to us. Besides people's accounts, wherever possible, because he was interacting with the people, So, Herodotus has also taken full use of the translated annals of these countries. While making use of these annals, he appears fairly critical in that he compares them with each other. So, he is cross-checking the information wherever possible. So, that is a very modern technique in writing history to test the reliability of their informations. He has, for example, compared the information in Persian annals with the Egyptian annals and vice versa. Like a dispassionate historian, and I am very confident about using this adjective, when confronted with two or more conflicting views about an event or about a person, he records them all, and then he goes on to indicate his preferences. I give you one example for a particular viewpoint. His preferences in such cases are often very objectively argued and appear, genuine, very near the truth. So, at the same time, he is not critical enough. Give the devil his due. He very faithfully records fables, myths, or events whose causal relationships were seen in the supernatural forces. Now, this can't be a part of history, it cannot be an historical explanation. Thus, he records the intervention of Apollo, the god, in favor of some Egyptian queen of some Greek king. He also quite carelessly notes that in India, there is a large amount of gold found in mountains dug out by gigantic gold digging ants. Now, this is far from the truth. Nevertheless, Herodotus was the founder of history as a science. These are some of the, we have to be critical if we want to be modern historian. So, he is very informal and remarkably honest. Besides giving information, he takes care to cite the sources of his information, leaving the reader to test them. It is up to you to decide their credibility of his facts from the nature of his evidence. Regarding India, one very important information he bequeaths is about the rate of interest. He says that in India you can borrow money at the rate of 1% per month, which is an exorbitant rate, 12% per month. But when we compared this rate of interest from ancient times and especially during Mughal period when our records are more adequate, we found that he is actually writing about the right rate of interest. So, you see, such an important thing, rate of interest, you do not find rate of interest reflected in our sources. Well, this gentleman is so economically conscious that he is giving us this information. Possibly he had gathered this information from the merchants or people who had visited India. So, friends, next important figure of Greek historiography. In fact, these are the two persons who had laid foundation of history writing in the 5th century BC is Thucydides. 460, possibly he was born in 460 BC or earlier, or died after 404 BC or in 404 BC in violence of the war, Athens' Spartan wars. He was the greatest of ancient Greek historians, the author of the history of the Peloponnesian War, which recounts the struggle between Athens and Sparta in the 5th century BC. His work was the first recorded political and moral analysis of a nation's war policies. He was elected strategos, a military magistrate of great importance in 424 BC. So, he was younger than Herodotus. His father's name was Olorus, which is not known as an Athenian name, but Olorus was probably of Thracian descent on his mother's side. Thucydides was related to the great Athenian statesman and general Miltiades, who had married the daughter of a Thracian prince of this name. He himself had property in Thrace, included mining rights in gold mines opposite the island of Thasos, and was a man of influence there. He was in Athens in 430-429 BC when great pestilence had occurred. I am talking about Thucydides. He had caught the disease himself and saw others also suffer from it. This reminds me of COVID and its impact 2-3 years back. I had also suffered from it. Later in 424 BC, he was elected as one of the 10 strategos of the year. This was a very important position, and was given command of the fleet, the Thrace based at Thasos. He failed to prevent the capture of the important city of Amphipolis by the Spartan general Brasidas. It may sound something like some Indian name, Banarsidas. Brasidas. Because of this blunder, he was recalled, tried, sentenced to exile. That was the punishment given to him. Now he will make a virtue of vice. This, he says, letter gave him greater opportunity for undistracted study of his history, and for wider travel and contacts, gathering of facts and figures, especially on the Peloponnesian side, Sparta and its allies. The history is divided into 8 books, probably not divided by Thucydides himself, by Thucydides' design, because it stops in the middle of the events of autumn of 411 BC. 3 historians, Cratylus, younger contemporary, Xenophon, who lived a generation later, and Theopompus, who lived in the last third of the 4th century BC, all began their histories of Greece where Thucydides had let off. So, where he terminates, they start. He was an Athenian citizen, roughly 25 years junior to Herodotus. When he was about 30, he witnessed the Peloponnesian Wars between Sparta and Athens, which impressed him so much that he set out to write a history of the Peloponnesian Wars. Unlike Herodotus, who by a series of, as I said just now, deceptive digressions, enlarges the encompass of his history, the Thucydides, concentrates on wars and seeks to write the history of these wars with as much detail, minute details and in-depth analysis as possible. Background to the war, is important for understanding his, contributions, his aptitude for history. Ever since Athens succeeded in subduing Persia, it adopted an expansionist policy, conquering other Greek cities, they were city-states, and converting them into colonies of Athens. It had developed a strong navy, an impressive though cruel democracy between free citizens. Against this city was pitted another important city, Sparta, supporting in this war by a large number of states. Sparta was supported by a large number of states which were threatened by the expansionism of Athens. So, Sparta was an oligarchy and possessed a very strong militarized structure with well-trained and highly disciplined commanders and land soldiers. Owing to the varying political systems of Sparta and Athens, they represent 2 different kinds of political ideologies, the war assumed constitutional overtones. It was seen as a tussle between 2 polities, democracy versus oligarchy. Beyond this ideological flavor was the substance of the war. Athens was a big trading center, having colonized, as I said, the islands of the Aegean Sea. It was fast developing into a colonial empire within Greece. Besides trade, its another important source of income came from huge tributes it levied on these colonies which they had vanquished, as against the expansion of this cruel democracy, where the settlements in southern Italy, which allied with Sparta to forge a united resistance against Athens' ambitions. So, Thucydides was an Athenian and was present in some of these events himself. Unlike Herodotus, he totally concentrates on the subject. No digression, nothing. He has chosen. There are no diversions. In that respect, he is a historian of greatest rigorous imaginable. Unlike Herodotus, again, he gives no quarter to myths. He had given quarter to myths in the sense that he says behind this event, Apollo is responsible. He doesn't say that. He is not, citing fables or causal explanation along the supernatural lines. He is giving natural causes. He condemns an Athenian general for regulating his conduct of actions by lunar eclipse. He was very critical of it. How lunar eclipse will tell you that you will win or not. So, he refers to people going to oracles, but is totally skeptical about them, about the efficacy of these things. Therefore, he is not only rational, but even atheistic.